No, it's not. So I think that means there are 82 students. That's it, 25. And I have this one class of 12 kids. It's lovely. And it's kids that I don't get taking for juniors. I have 101 students. Yeah. They actually divided it super evenly amongst the entire. So we let the each one and then we divide it up. Keynotes, they told us. We call it keynotes. Just saying. 6:45. There it is. 6:45. 6:45. There's a 13 at 6:45. Have you met this person? Yeah. Yeah, they're aiming for 7 or more.
Testing.
4 times. Oh my gosh. Doing fine. Fine. That's how you do. I'm still working.
Wait, so what office do you work in?
I'm the director of operations. So my spiritual director, sorry, I had to it's like a text her and they she'd been on a beach vacation for 3 weeks. Sorry, I had to do it when Greg Boyle was talking and they wanted us to do it. Oh yeah. That was Greg Boyle.
Oh, that's
That's really good. It's given me both. That's in here, or it's pretty much mostly from here. But there's other people I'm not getting in on this. I'm checking my phone. The only person who's texting me is Michelle.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like this. Why are we saying you want to see now? It's once a month on Wednesday night in the Richmond. It's a little Episcopal church. There's a little not coffee, but reception afterwards because we're building community. So I'll just send you that info. Oh, and they're still coming in.
In the back.
Someone said you're ready for this. I mean, I take part second for yeah. Well, I imagine it's hard to train it. And some people in prison, some people just cover in the garage. She says, I don't know how many more gaps I have left, but I want to die pretty soon. She's hard to do. I really need some people who just society professors.
No, I'm saying that's why.
But I don't use my phone because I'm just have a lot of work to do. Exactly. I'll do the end or the 7 depending on the Andrew's been coming. Oh, that's wonderful. I will do. I will do. So many years.
No.
actually like described it like I have a recollection that that does sound like something I've come up with. Yeah. And I'm like, if you let me overextend my own metaphor that I don't even remember, let's talk about this. Oh, no, it's like when to push and when to calm down on stuff. Yeah. Like at one point I started pushing my writing, she goes, oh, so your it's hard. I was like, okay, first, like, 45 minutes in. Act justly, lead us to the water, down by the riverside. They are evil, and you are mine. Because Lizanne did it with song. We had picture retakes today, and I needed to retake a picture. Shelby very much knows that. And very much knows that. I heard that all the difference. She was in high school freshman.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening, and welcome to St. Agnes Parish. We're going to begin with a little bit of a vocal warm-up this evening to kind of center ourselves. So if those who have a little song sheet have it handy, we're going to begin with the song Act Justly.
And fill to the water, wash us in the river, lead us to the water, wash us in the river, lead us to the water, wash us in the river, lead us to the water, wash us in the river, lead us to the water, bring us to the feast, wash us in the river, and fill us with your peace. Hold us in your mercy, heal us with your heart, lift us from the darkness, and teach us with your love, fill us with your fire, lead us from the night, guide us in your wisdom, and draw us to your light, lead us to the water, bring us to the feast, wash us in the river, and fill us with your peace.
Gonna lay down my sword and shield,
Down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside,
gonna lay down my sword and shield,
down by the riverside, study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
gonna lay down my war shoes,
Down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside,
gonna lay down my war shoes,
down by the riverside, study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
gonna put on my long white robe,
Down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside,
gonna put on my long white robe,
down by the riverside, study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
gonna meet my Savior.
Down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside.
Gonna meet my Savior. Down by
the riverside, study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to St. Agnes Church and Father's Greg Boyle presentation from Friendship to Kinship. On behalf of our staff and parish community, once again, welcome. My name is Father Alejandro Baez. I'm a Jesuit from the West Province, and I serve as a parish administrator of St. Agnes Church. Once again, welcome. We extend our warm greetings to all parishioners, guests, family and friends of St. Agnes Parish, and all of our friends and viewers and supporters online. And we have also Father Greg this evening through the kindness and generosity of one of our own parishioners. So thank you. So here is our agenda for this evening as follows. Father Greg and David and Maya will share some of his insights, followed by a 10 to 15 minutes Q&A session, and then we'll conclude with a social gathering hosted by the pastoral staff, the parish council, and many wonderful parish volunteers. We invite you to donate by using our QR code that you have on the pews at the entrance of the church, and also to share the many wonderful stories on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and who knows how many other things they are available. Please be as generous as you can and share the good news. Now, allow me to introduce you Sister Celeste Newman, a Sister of Mercy, and a member of our parish council, who will introduce our guest speaker.
And good evening. Father Greg Boyle is the founder of Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, the largest gang intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry program in the world. Born and raised in Los Angeles and a Jesuit priest, from 1986 to 1982, Father Boyle served as pastor of Dolores Mission Church in Boyle Heights. Dolores Mission was the poorest Catholic parish in Los Angeles that also had the highest concentration of gang activity in the city. Father Boyle witnessed the devastating impact of gang violence on his community during the so-called Decade of Death that began in the late 1980s and peaked at 1,000 gang-related killings in 1992. In the face of law enforcement tactics and criminal justice policies of suppression and mass incarceration as the means to end gang violence, He and parish community members adopted what was a radical approach at the time. Treat gang members as human beings. In 1988, they started what would eventually become Homeboy Industries, which employs and trains former gang members in a range of social enterprises, as well as provides critical services to thousands of individuals who walk through its doors every year, seeking a better life. Father Boyle is the author of the 2010 New York Times-bestseller, which you may have read, Tattoos on the Heart, The Power of Boundless Compassion, followed by Barking to the Choir, The Power of Radical Kinship in 2017, and The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness in 2021. Most recently, he authored Forgive Everyone, Everything, an anthology of writings accompanied by Fabian Deborah's artwork. Father Greg has received the California Peace Prize and been inducted into the California Hall of Fame. In 2014, President Obama named Father Boyle a champion of change. He received the University of Notre Dame 2017 Laetare Medal, the oldest honor given to American Catholics. Homeboy Industries was the recipient of the 2020 Hilton Humanitarian Prize, validating 32 years of Father Greg Boyle's vision and work by the organization for over 3 decades. Father Greg was invited to St. Agnes at the personal request of Father Alejandro because Father Greg and Father Brent played a pivotal role as the mentor priests who vested Father Alejandro during his ordination in 2018. Consequently, a strong and affectionate bond exists among these Jesuit brothers, characterized by their shared Jesuit identity and a deep friendship that is expressed in the words of St. Agnes and the Society of Jesus. Please welcome Father Greg Boyle and our friends David and Maya Reyes from Homeboy Industries.
Good evening. My name is David Reyes. I'm here to share a little bit about my story. I grew up in Pasadena, California. I was raised by my grandparents. My father was in the home, but wasn't really there to give me the attention that I needed. So my grandparents became my parents. And in 2004, my grandmother passed away. And a year later, my grandfather passed away. So I joined the neighborhood, and I was facing a 45 to life sentence, and I started fighting my fitness. What that means is you start fighting whether they're gonna keep you in juvenile court or try you as an adult. My dad got me a lawyer, and I took a deal for juvenile life. I went in 2005, got out right before I turned 21. I was 15 at the time. I got out, I met the mother of my children. I had 3 kids, and I found myself getting hooked on meth and had my kids living in a car for a year, homeless. living from motel to motel. And finally, I tried to leave. I went to Las Vegas, trying to get sober, but it just got worse. I went to Atlanta. And still, I started getting high with my uncle. From there, I went to North Carolina, where the mother of my children decided that she had enough. She didn't want to be with me, so she took my youngest, which was 2 at the time. I stood raising my 2 kids, which were 3 and 5. I stood there, did good, got sober, decided to come back in 2020, back to California. I started getting high again and started going back to the neighborhood. Finally, one day, my mom kicked me out. We were homeless again. I was living in a car. I head back to Pasadena, and I ended up taking my kids on a high-speed chase with me. I lost them for 2 years to DCFS. I went through everything I had to do, jumped through hoops. I got them back, full custody. I got them back last year in April. Closed my DCFS case in October with full custody. I decided to go, while my kids were in school, I was still going to my neighborhood, all the way from Long Beach to Pasadena. And along the way, I would pass Homeboy Industries. And I'll just look at it and tell myself, like, I should maybe try it, but I'm not gonna get hired there. So finally I went, and they gave me a date to go drug test, to go do my orientation, and then to do my interview. And finally when I went and I got my interview done, I told them our story, and they hired me on the spot. Since being there, I've been working on myself mentally and just taking care of all the issues I had going on. And out of being there, I met my beautiful wife, where we just got married August 3rd. And we just got married August 3rd, and we have our own apartment now, and we're making it. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maya Reyes. I was born and raised in San Fernando Valley. I just got out doing a 10.5-year term. I just got released June 30th of this year. I was born and raised in the Valley. My mom, my grandma, and my great-grandmother raised me. My mom was into the lifestyle, and of course I followed along. Me and my mom were best friends. We're mother-daughter. It was more of a best friend, 20 years apart exactly. Well, I had a lot of anger issues. So I was just always angry. I was mad at the world. So I was always causing violence and stuff. But because I wasn't protected as a young child, I protected other people. So I got involved into the lifestyle tough. I was always running amok, running the streets and everything. Well, I ended up getting pregnant with my oldest daughter at the age of 17. I stopped doing a lot of things. I left to Utah, then came back to LA. When I came back to LA, my daughter got taken with my mom. My mom took her because I was supposed to get on my feet. Well, it didn't turn out that way. I went down a downward spiral. I started getting high and got more active into the neighborhood. I was lost. I was angry. I was hurt. I was everything. So I got lost into everything, into nothing but darkness. I had to find acceptance somewhere, and that's where I found acceptance, was into the life. I was a lost soul. And then I got pregnant with my youngest daughter, and I got arrested 6 days after I had her. And that's where I fought 45 to life. I was fighting my case. I was angry, everything. I lost it all. So instead of having to do 45, I was blessed to do 16 years with 85%. So right there is where I made the deal, asking God, begging God, saying, okay, you help me get a date, I'm gonna change. Well, he showed up and showed out. I got 16 years. It was a hard trial, through ups and downs, being inside. But I was determined to change. I was determined to give back. I was determined to get back home to my children, at that. My youngest daughter I had no contact with. They took her away from me. My oldest is the one that I had contact with here and there. It was a struggle, but I always told myself, when it was God's timing, they would come back. My release date was supposed to be 2026. Well, I got out in 2023. I was in Chowchilla, it's the level 4 prison, CCWF. The last year and like 2 years, I went to CIW, went to fire camp. After that, I went to a program called CCTRP. It's a community transitional home for people who've done time, to finish their prison time outside. You get an ankle monitor. So that's where I got into Homeboys, because we were connected, so I was able to go over there to go do tattoo removal. Well, I went there to go speak and ask someone if I could get a job. They said I can once I get accepted. So I had to go through all kinds of paperwork, get approved through Sacramento and everything. Once I got approved through Sacramento, I got hired, and I started November 22nd of last year at Homeboy Industries. Homeboy Industries opened up a lot of doors for me. I got to reconnect with family. I got to really become a different person. And not just that, I really got to give back, because I want to reach out to the youth, because I know how it felt to be stubborn and not know that there was help, because we're so stuck in one way and having to be something, when honestly, deep down inside, all we really want is to be loved. If not just that, at least show that we do care about others instead of having that facade. And so being there, I was able to do that with men and women, elderly and young, able to give back to the community. Because being inside prison, I can honestly say I was more freer than I was before. When I was on the streets back then, I became free within. And then actually getting to experience the actual physical freedom, it's a blessing. And having the opportunity to walk through doors and find kinship, to find peace finally, to find that you belong and not where you stand out, where people judge you and look at you upside the head because they see you with tattoos or they see you because how you dress. We're equal. We're one. And that's why I love Homeboy Industries today. And when I do see people, I say hi. I'm a very joyful spirit. I love smiling. I love playing around. I love just to have fun. I love the joy, because it's not me that I want to be seen, but I want God to be seen in me. I want to be used as that vessel. And I'm happy to say that I have found my wonderful husband there. And we're having a family, and like everything happens little by little, but I'm thankful. I'm thankful today for the freedom I have, and I'm thankful to be here, as well to be here with Pops and do something different. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
So they got married on August 3, and so Alejandro invited me up here, so I said, hey, you guys, how about a honeymoon? So that's what we did. And I put him on a boat to Alcatraz yesterday, so. Thank you. Thank you, compadre. So it's been a joy to travel with them for these days, and to introduce David to clam chowder. You know, in one of those big sourdough bowls. He said, what are these things floating in the soup? clams. But I think they've had a good time, and it's been a joy to know them and to have them with me. So there's so many friends in here and people who have heard me before, so any number of you could give this talk. So it happens. Once I was invited to this foster grandparent gathering in Orange County. Well, I had spoken at it the summer before, so I don't know why they invited me 2 summers in a row. So I went to the thing, and after the talk, this grandmother came up to me, a foster grandmother. I think she liked the talk. She had big tears in her eyes. She grabbed both my hands and she said, "I heard you last year. It never gets better." So I'd like to think that she misspoke there. Thank you, Celeste, for mentioning all the books. The last book I wrote was The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness. And I was on a plane, I was flying home, and I was returning to my seat from the restroom, and I see a tray table is down, somebody on the aisle has a book open, and those of you who have The Whole Language, it has kind of a turquoise cover, and I thought, oh my God, somebody's reading my book, you know, and so I tried to be low pro, and I walked by. The guy was knocked out. I believe he was drooling. So apparently reading my books is the next best thing to a CPAP machine. So that's what a homie called, you need to pepper your talk with self-defecating humor. So that's what that was. Anyway, so we're in a church, and so part of the anchor of what I want to kind of suggest before I pull David and Maya up here for a Q&A period is a kind of you know, what brings you out tonight? You know, it's about wanting the world to look differently than it currently looks. Somehow we want to align our imagination to the God of love. And so we want to imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. We want to dismantle the barriers that exclude. So what Martin Luther King says of church could well be said of our time here tonight. It's not the place you've come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to imagine such a circle. You go from here to conjure up an image of a community of cherished belonging where everyone is included. You go from here to stand at the margins because that's the only way they'll ever get erased, if you stand out at them. You go from here to stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless, to stand with those whose dignity has been denied and those whose burdens are more than they can bear. You go from here to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and to stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And the goal is to create a community of kinship such that God might recognize it. And I suspect if kinship happened to be our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice. We would be celebrating it. And so we brace ourselves as we inch out to the margins, because the world will accuse us of wasting our time. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, "For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing." And you go from here tonight, and other voices will get heard. So the truth of the matter, we're in a church, and so none of what I've just said to you makes any damn sense unless it's aligned to the heart of a God who is spacious and expansive. What St. Ignatius of Loyola called the God who's always greater. That's what we're looking for, because we've settled for a partial God, and we want to hold out for something greater. The great Meister Eckhart, who was a theologian and a mystic who lived before Ignatius, he used to say, "It is a lie, any talk of God that doesn't comfort you." And that's hard for us to believe, though in the deepest part of the heart of our soul, we know that that's the truth. I had a spiritual director once who said to me, "You know, we need a better God than the one we have." He was a Jesuit. But everybody knows he's right, because we've settled for less. And so we want to find this expansive notion, because we've created God in our own image, and that's gotten us into trouble. My friend Annie Lamott says, "You know you've created God in your own image when God hates the same people you do." So we want to avoid that. There are a few of you here who've been locked up at San Fernando Juvenile Hall, and I would say Mass there in this big old gym, and I don't know, we'd get hundreds and hundreds of gang members there. And I remember I was sitting in my little folding chair, and they had these sheets that had the readings in them in English and in Spanish. And then the homies would get up and they would do the readings. And I remember I said, "Well, I'm not going to read along, I'm going to listen." So I folded the sheet and I put it on my lap and I closed my eyes. And the first kid got up and did a reading from the Old Testament. Then another kid who was detained there, along with the hundreds of them, and he got up and he was doing the responsorial psalm. And I don't know, there was like an abundance of confidence in his voice, overconfidence. And he got up and he said, "The Lord is exhausted." And I said, "What the hell?" And it was, "The Lord is exalted." And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's way better. Because if you think about it, the exalted God is really our creation. If you were God, you would want to be exalted. But the exhausted God we get that. We understand what that is, you know? Maybe somebody asks you, "How was your weekend?" "Oh, I'm pooped. I had the grandkids over." But it's a good tired. You know what it's like. Exhausted means kind of extensive of yourself. It's anchored in the other person. It's somebody who wants to forget themselves on purpose to be there for the other. It's way better than the exalted God. Mirabai Starr, who's a a mystic and translates mystics. She says, once you know the God of love, you fire all the other gods. And that's the task of the mature believer. You spend your life firing all the other gods. And so we try to find the notions that help us understand this exhausted God, this God of love. So I've been on Zooms a lot, and even since the pandemic has waned, and I was just on a Zoom with my siblings. So I have 5 sisters and I have 2 brothers. And once a month now, since the pandemic, we never did it before, we get together on a Sunday at 4 o'clock. So we just did it. And it was my mom's anniversary of her death, and so we were kind of reminiscing. And she died, I buried my father like 25 years ago, I guess. And my mom died somewhere after the first year of the Trump administration. It was kind of a marker for me. And she died as we all want to die. She was 92 years old. She died in her own home, in her own bed, surrounded by her kids. And she was sharp as a tack even to the end. And in fact, in the last year of her life, she had watched so much MSNBC, she was becoming Rachel Maddow. And she wasn't a lick afraid of dying. I remember like a month before she died, she was just giddy. She was just exhilarated. And she said, "I've never done this before," which is something you might say just before skydiving. And in fact, the day before she died, I was sitting alone in a room, which never happened. There were always a bunch of people, but it was just the 2 of us. I was at the foot of her bed and she was asleep. And she woke up and she saw me sitting there and she said, "Oh, for crying out loud." And she went back to sleep. Well, she was pissed that she hadn't died. Sorry. Well, the next day at exactly noon, I was again there alone at the foot of her bed. And I think my sisters had been out to go get lunch or something. And at exactly noon, she sits up, she opens her eyes, she lets out this wondrous, glorious gasp. Skydiving. And she left us. And nobody in earshot of that sound could ever be afraid of death again. And I remembered that in the last days of her life, she'd be in and out of consciousness, but when she would come to, she would lock on to just one of us. And she would kind of laser beam focus, and she'd look at this one of her kids, and we'd be all gathered around her bed. And she would say with breathless delight, "You're here. You're here." And I remembered that when we buried her, that I suspect this is the singular agenda item of our exhausted God. Only to look at you and to say, "You're here. You're here." In fact, I always think of Jesus in the desert, 40 days, 40 nights. And it's a kind of a precursor, to our Lent, which always reminds me of a homegirl named Michelle Nunez who came into my office and she said, "It's official. I just found out my man's been cheating on me." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." "I don't sweat it. I just went to church, got me them ashes, gave his ass up for Lent." That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But I'm Pavlov's dog. If I say the word Lent, I have to talk about Michelle Nunez. But there is Jesus, and we have this notion that Jesus, it's sort of dark night of the soul, maybe. It's kind of anguish. Maybe he's afraid, grumbling stomach. All those images of his 40 days and 40 nights. And I suspect it was mainly just the God of love looking at him and saying, "You're here, you're here." And so God is love, and God is loving. And none of that tells us how God is. It tells us where God is. God is in the loving. And then we find our true selves in loving. And we learn to live our lives by love alone. And once you know that loving is your home, you will never be homesick again. So Homeboy was started, as was kindly mentioned in the introduction, when I was pastor of Dolores Mission. Very poor, 8 gangs at war with each other. I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988. I buried my 257th a month ago. Not all from that community, but I belong to a very large gang intervention program. And so I get asked to do that. So the first thing we did as a parish was we started a school because there were so many junior high, middle school gang members who had been given the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them. So they were wreaking havoc in the projects, and they were writing on walls, and they were violent. So I walked out to them and I said, you know, if I found a school that would take you, would you come? And to my surprise, every single one said, yes, you know, I would. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, you know, so that forced my hand. So right across the street from the church is our parochial school, grades K to 8, occupying the first 2 floors. And then the entire 3rd floor was the convent. And so one evening I gathered all the nuns together in the living room and I sat them down and I said, hey, would you guys mind, you know, moving out and we could, you know, start a school for gang members? And they looked at each other and they said, sure. And that was the entirety of their discernment process. So we were off and running, and gang members came in large numbers to the church property, which created something of a disconnect. People would kind of sidle up to me and say, aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed, you know, good people in and bad people out, which was a good gospel challenge. And then they kept saying if only we had jobs. So myself and the women in the parish was mainly women with children, we marched around the factories that surrounded the housing projects trying to find felony-friendly employers, and that wasn't so forthcoming. So we started stuff, a maintenance crew, a landscaping crew, a crew to build our child care center, all made up of rivals from the 8 gangs. And then in 1992, after the acquittal of the 4 police officers who beat down Rodney King, every pocket of poverty in Los Angeles ignited, except the poorest pocket, my parish. So the LA Times wanted to know why that was, so I said, well, I don't know, maybe part of it was because We had 60 strategically hired gang members who had a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang the night before, and more to the point of your question, a reason not to torch and ignite their own community. So the article appeared the next day. The following day, I was summoned to the Beverly Hills office of Ray Stark, a movie producer who happened to have $500 million. And he said, "What should I do with my money?" As I look back on it now, I can see that I woefully undershot my request. I was young, I had hair. I said, "Well, there's an abandoned bakery across the street from the school. You could buy it. It has ovens, they don't work, but you could fix them. And we could put hairnets on rival gang members, and they could bake bread. We could call it Homeboy Bakery." And that was the extent of my business plan. And we were off and running, and then we started Homeboy Tortillas a month later. And now we're 35 years old. Nobody ever intended to do this, but we kind of backed our way. We evolved our way into becoming the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. So 10,000 folks a year walk through our doors wanting to reimagine their lives and to have a future. And so we have an 18-month training program of which these two are a part. We have 13 social enterprises, free tattoo removal, therapy, classes. Everyone who walks through the doors comes barricaded behind a wall of shame and disgrace, and the only thing that can scale that wall is tenderness. Everyone who comes through those doors comes with what a psychologist would call a disorganized attachment. Mom was either frightened or frightening, and you can't calm yourself down if you've never been soothed. A great many lifers will say when they get to Homeboy, we're used to being watched, but we're not used to being seen. And so we create a place that's safe, where people can be seen and then they can be cherished. If it's true that the traumatized are likely to cause trauma, it has to be equally true that the cherished will be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and others. Let me just put a parenthesis in here. So, I'm a Jesuit, like Alejandro, like the Pope. Hold for cheap applause line. There. I'm just saying. So Frank Buckley, a lot of you know Frank Buckley, and then Mark Torres. So there are three of us who work there, but the homies don't really know what a Jesuit is too much. And though we've always had Jesuits work there over the years. And so I'm in my office, and it's a glass enclosed office, and I can look out into the reception area where Maya works, and it's packed all the time. And I'm meeting with three homies. So probably 8 times a day, we have tour groups from all over the world, and the homies are giving tours all the time. So there was a group of like 20 people just plant themselves in front of my office. It's a tour, and it's, observe our founder in his natural habitat kind of moment. And Osvaldo is giving the tour, and he has what the homies call a loud-ass voice. And he's saying, "This is Father Greg Boyle. He's the founder of Homeboy Industries. He is a jiu-jitsu priest. So from my office, I do some of my best moves. So anyway, I tell you that to say that on February 27th, 1544, St. Ignatius of Loyola enters this word for the first time in his spiritual diary. Then he proceeds to use the word repeatedly from there on for the remaining 12 years of his life. Before he dies, he goes back and he circles the word. Now, I speak Spanish, but I had never heard of this word before. And the word is acatamiento. Acatamiento. And it comes from a kind of an archaic word, acatar, which means to look at something with attention. Acatamiento. And I'm sure it was born of a mystical moment between Ignatius and his God. But he didn't want to settle for a moment. He wanted to hold out for a stance in the world. And the word gets translated as affectionate awe. Acatamiento. It's how we are meant to go from this place tonight and stand at the margins with affectionate awe. And the word awe reminds me of the Acts of the Apostles, where it says, and awe came upon everyone. And it suggests that the measure of health in any community at all, including this one, may well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. Acatamiento. To look at something with attention, affectionate awe. So many years ago, I was invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia, at what we call in the biz a gang in-service, where they have keynotes and breakout sessions and workshops to teach social workers how to deal with kids who find their way into a gang. And so they commandeer a hotel ballroom and they sign in for credits, and for 9 to 5 they hear people talk about why do kids gravitate towards gang life. And so had done a lot of these, and so I said yes and figured I would do a keynote, and so I bought my plane ticket. Well, a week before I was to fly, I pull out the original letter inviting me, and to my horror, I discovered that I was to be the only speaker all damn day 9 to 5. And I said to myself what the homies often say, oh, hell no, I'm not going to be the only speaker. So I call in 2 trainees, Andre, an African-American gang member, and Jose, and I sit them down, and they're like in their 9th month of their 18 months. And I said, look, at the end of the week, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I'd like you to get up in front of 600 social workers and tell your stories. Take your time. Because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I'd never heard their stories. Jose gets up first, and I guess he's like 25 years old at the time, and he's been to prison, tattooed, shot caller. At that juncture, he because we have different phases and people work in different places, and he was working, kind of helping in our substance use disorder team, a man solid in his own recovery, and now he's helping younger homies and homegirls with their addiction issues. So not only had he been in prison and a gang member, he also had a long stretch as a homeless man, even longer stretch as a heroin addict. And so he gets up in front of 600 social workers and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when my mom looked at me and said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasp. And he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish. And then they did what you just did. And then he continued, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California. And she walks me up to an orphanage and she knocks on the door and the guy comes to the door and she says, I found this kid and she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had left me. And my grandmother rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day, my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school each day. First t-shirt, because the blood would seep through. Second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion, and he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. For the truth of the matter is this: if we don't welcome our own wounds, we may well be tempted to despise the wounded. Acatamiento, affectionate awe. I'm going to bring this home and then bring the 2 of them up with a last story. It occurs often enough at universities in particular to force their students to read my books against their will. And I'm not complaining, but Gonzaga University, my alma mater, who ruins my bracket every March, had forced the incoming freshmen to read Tattoos on the Heart. So they said, could you come up? There'll be a big talk, a Tuesday night, 1,000 people, big venue. And could you bring 2 homies? So I said, sure. And, I always, pick homies, except if they're on their honeymoon. I do this differently. But I usually pick homies who are rivals, enemies, just to force them to share a hotel room just to mess with them. And I always pick homies who have never flown before just for the thrill of watching gang members panicked in the sky. Many years ago, I had 2 veteranos. I was at LAX airport, and one guy said, hey, G, are we flying Virgin Airlines because it's our first time? I said, well, yeah, it's a requirement. We'll be coming home on American. So I picked Larry, an African-American gang member, and Mario, and the 2 of them were from enemy gangs. I'm used to, nervous Nellies, but Mario was really the most paniqueado person I've ever flown with. He was just so terrified. It was starting to freak me out a little bit. He was hyperventilating, which I had never really witnessed, and we hadn't even boarded the plane yet. And so we're at Burbank, which is kind of smallish, but big Southwest Airlines planes. And you don't go onto that hermetically sealed chute to board. You walk out onto the tarmac like you're the president, and you climb up the steps at the front of the plane, big feature at Burbank, steps to board at the back of the plane. And so I'm sitting there with them, and Larry is off walking in the airport, and it's early morning, so it's the first flight of the day, and our flight crew arrives, and I see 2 female flight attendants, and both of them have very large cups in both hands, Starbucks coffee, and they're schlepping up the front steps to board the plane. And Mario says, when are we going to board the plane? I say, oh, as soon as they sober up the pilots. There they go now. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that, but I should tell you that in our 35-year history, Mario is the most tattooed individual who has ever worked there, which I think is saying something. And he's all sleeved out to his fingertips, neck blackened with the name of his gang, head shaved, covered in tattoos, forehead, cheeks, chin, eyelids that say the end, so that apparently when he's lying in his coffin, there won't be any doubt for anybody, I guess. And so I'm walking him through the airport trying to calm him down. And I'd never been in public with him, and people are, oh my God, and people are holding their kids more closely. And I'm thinking, wow, if you were to go to Homeboy tomorrow, walk up to anybody and say, who's the kindest, most gentle soul who works here, we'd all say Mario. Mario is proof that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. Mario is proof as to what George Saunders says, that the only non-delusional response to everything is kindness. So we get to Spokane, and it's the big talk is Tuesday night, but they don't tell you that you have to speak in like 93 classes all during the day Tuesday, and you go, oh my God. So I said, look, you guys get up, I'm going to sit in the back of the classroom. So they were very nervous, especially Mario, but they did a good job. Stories of terror and torture and violence and abuse of every imaginable kind. And honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance, otherwise you'd get scorched. I would not have survived a single day of either of their childhoods. And so just like with Maya and David, they get up before me, and Mario in particular was quite terrified. And they did a good job again, and I did my thing, and then I invited them up to stand on either side of me, as I will David and Maya in 2 minutes. And I said, yeah, questions? Yes, ma'am. And a woman stands and she goes, yeah, I got a question. It's for Mario. First question out the gate. And Mario is a tall, skinny drink of water, and he grabs the microphone and he's just terrified. Yes? And she says, well, Mario, you say you're a father and you have a daughter and a son who are about to reach their teenage years. What wisdom do you impart to them? You know, what advice do you give them? And Mario closes his eyes and he's starting to tremble, and he's getting a friggin' hernia trying to come up with whatever the hell he's gonna say. And when suddenly he blurts out, as soon as he says those two words, he races back to his microphone, clutching closed-eyed refuge. And now I know he's losing the battle with his tears, but he wants to get the whole sentence out. I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence until the woman who asked the question stands, and now it's her turn to cry. Why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are loving, you are kind, you are gentle, you are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. And 1,000 total perfect strangers stand, and they will not stop clapping, and all Mario can do is hold his face in his hands, so overwhelmed that this room full of strangers had returned him to himself, and everybody standing had been returned to themselves. And I think that's the only praise our exhausted God has any interest in. So St. Agnes is not the place you've come to tonight. It was always going to be the place you go from. And you go from here to imagine a circle of compassion and to imagine nobody standing outside of it. You go from here to dismantle the messages that shame people. You go from here to create a community of cherished belonging, which is God's dream come true. And you go from here to know that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. And soon enough you cease to care if anybody accuses you of wasting your time with affectionate awe at the margins. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. Thank you very much.
Please be seated. We will have a few minutes of Q&A. Please be seated. We have 3 people here in the front with the microphones. Can we please raise your hand and be on the position? If you have any questions or comments, please come to the people in the microphone. Any questions or comments, come to the person on the microphone. Stand up and come to the person on the microphone. Please come to the person on the microphone. Say your name, just your name and the question. And right there, please.
Hi, my name is Robin. We drove like 2.5 hours to be here to see you. And first of all, you're very articulate, both of you, to be, not only just in your speaking, but you came across so well. But I'm a teacher, and I'm seeing we have a huge, a lot of immigrants and a lot of newcomers, and I see the kids so accepting of each other, but I don't see adults as accepting, which concerns me because I see the kindness in others. But do you have a teacher in your life ever that talked to you or listened to you or cared about you that stood out during your education? I talk fast. A teacher. Did you have a teacher in your life in school?
Did you have experience in school, like with a teacher? No? No. Nobody?
No?
Oh,
That
the
makes me
answer is
sad.
no, but
Can you repeat the question again, specifically the question?
I'm just, as a teacher, I hope I make a difference with all the children coming. We live in the Central Valley. Did you have a teacher in your life that you could reach out to or cared about you that made a difference?
Honestly, I didn't at the time, because like the schools I was at, a lot of them, they weren't, I was in the ghetto, you know, and like a lot of teachers didn't have that kind of compassion or heart. So it was mainly more like, if you didn't get it right, they weren't showing you any compassion or anything. So I can't say.
Thank you. Please stand, come to the microphone. Oh, quickly go, Rustin.
I was wondering if you ran across any kids that, well, they're not kids anymore, but a 45-year-old kid who was born on Halloween.
sorry. It's really hard to hear. I don't know how you guys are doing.
Put the microphone again. Can you repeat your question? What is exactly?
I'm looking for my missing kid, and I've been looking for 45 years. I've had no luck, and I was thinking he might have been through San Gabriel. So he'd be 45 now, and he was born in Halloween. His name Craig.
Okay, so maybe afterwards we can
We can talk.
talk about.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You know, let me if I could respond to the teacher, because you always get the teacher question. And I was at an event with a homie, and he answered. He said when he was like in the 3rd grade, the teacher would write a paragraph on the chalkboard and said, so copy this paragraph. And what always happened was the teacher would erase the paragraph before he was finished. And it used to frustrate him, and then it used to shame him, and then it used to enrage him. And then he dropped out of school. And I had never heard that before. This is Robert Mergel was saying this at a, and then he looked out and he says, teachers, don't erase the paragraph so soon. And I thought, wow, it was perfect. So, I mean, it was a simple kind of thing about waiting for people and knowing that people are at different places, and what do I know, about teaching? But I had never heard that before. So I'm not sure Q&A is going to work just because it's too hard to understand. We need simultaneous translation.
We have the last one over here.
How about one last one?
Last one.
Father Greg, my name is Greg also. And I have a question about all the good books you've written. What is your favorite and why?
What's your favorite and why? What book that you wrote?
Oh, the favorite book I wrote?
Yes.
What favorite book
The two of them are translating. And has nothing to do with you, it's just the acoustics of this beautiful place. I think I like the whole language the best because, you know, I wrote Tattoos on the Heart, and you don't know you're going to have a second book or a third book. So you try to jam everything into the first book because you think it's your only book. And so I think it's a little too jam-packed for me. But I like the third book because it's kind of more theological, and I don't know, I like it.
Great.
Anyway, you guys are great. We'll chat with you afterwards.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Please stand. Please. Thank you. Thank you. So, on behalf of St. Agnes and the community, thank you so much for staying. David, Maya, Greg, for being here with us. And please share our wonderful hospitality. They're going to be here with you guys. Say hi to David, Maya, and Greg for a few minutes. Make sure you introduce yourself. Take a photo. Don't take all the time. Don't tell the whole history of salvation. Just say hi. Share a little bit of the photo and mingle. We have wine, cheese, photos, and all of that. So please enjoy and mingle and drive safe. Take a copy of our events coming up and pray with us, be with us. Thank you for being at St. Agnes. God bless you all. Thank you. No, I got it. Thank you. We're going to take you there.